Hello, and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. Please note, topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial or investment advice. Today on the show, I spoke with Chris Gale, the Managing Director of Latin Resources, which is a listed company on the Australian Stock Exchange under code LRS. Chris founded the company in 2008, and since then it has gone through transformational changes to become the company it is today. Chris discussed what he has seen evolve in the resources industry and how Latin Resources managed the COVID-19 pandemic whilst operating within South America. We talked about the lithium cycles he has seen over the years, the current developments within the sector, and the projects that Latin Resources is developing. The conversation also touched on environmental, social, and corporate governance frameworks, ESG, and the differences between operating in Brazil compared to Western Australia. We also explored the potential barriers and challenges facing the lithium and mining sectors. I hope you enjoy listening. So hello and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. I'm your host, Ben Kostrich, and joining me on the show today is the Managing Director for Latin Resources, Chris Gale. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks, Ben. Glad to be here.
So a little bit of background on yourself. You have extensive experience in the public and private sector, in particular in mining. And we were just talking before going online that you were the founder and started Latin Resources. So can you give us a bit of background as to how you started the company and how it's progressing now?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I initially started my first part of my career, 15 years, with putting process systems into mines. So I really enjoyed that. Traveled around Australia and the world doing, putting what they call PLC, or Program Logic Control Systems, into mines early. And then I came across to Western Australia, started to develop my career here. Started a communications or telco called Swiftel that listed. That was my first public listing back in 2001, I think it was. That business got bought out in 2004, and then I went and worked for a private equity group for a year or so. Got offered some assets in South America, which mining assets, exploration assets in Peru in particular, and I really liked the look of those assets. So some iron ore and some copper, 2008. So I actually started the company Latin Resources in 2008. In 2010, we listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. And 15 years later, here we are. And we actually a week ago, 2 weeks ago, got announced or got admitted into the ASX All Ordinaries. So one of the top 500 companies in Australia now. So it was a very proud moment, but we've still got a lot of work to do.
So then over the 15 years, how has the company evolved? Because from the sounds of it already, it was, it's a priority in lithium now, but it's completely changed its outlook. So how have you sort of adapted over the years, and what have you noticed just from an industry outlook has evolved and changed since the company founded 15 years ago?
Well, I suppose with exploration, you've got to be pretty nimble and quick to make decisions. We started off in iron ore in Peru. We moved very quickly into copper in Peru. Peru's now the number two producing copper country in the world, and Chile is number one. So that's great copper. We still have a copper project there called MTO3, which is a copper porphyry. So we still have that project. What happened in 2016, 17, I was watching the guys here in WA start to develop what's called lithium spodumene pegmatites. It's folklore now, history now. When Ken Brinston and the guys developed Pilbara Minerals, I started looking at that with some great interest. So I asked the guys in Peru to do a desktop study to find some spodumene pegmatites potentially in South America. We weren't interested in brines. I thought that was too hard. So we came up with some projects in Catamarca, some lithium projects there, some spodumene pegmatites in Catamarca in Argentina. We actually drilled those in 2017, found some really good pegmatites there with some good grade. And someone sent me the presentation deck of a company called Sigma Lithium. At the time, it was about $100 million market cap. In 2018, early 19, I saw that. got the guys out of Argentina, sent them in Brazil, and the rest is history. Fortunately, COVID hit Brazil very, very hard, and we had to pull the guys off site. We just started to get to, I spent nearly 12 months exploring, mapping, sampling from Sigma's project up to where we are now in a place called Salinas. Fortunately, we had to pull out. We had a bit of a break in Brazil for 2 years, and then ultimately got back on the ground. End of 21, put our first hole down in February of 22 and had a major discovery of our Brazil Salinas lithium project then. So yes, we've evolved quite a bit.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And I mean, I've glossed over with a few people before about the impact that COVID had, but I mean, taking your mind back to there, what was the major halts that had to be stopped besides naturally getting everyone off site? But how much in regards to ever experiencing something like that? And in your position, how did the company navigate that unpredictable situation?
Well, once again, it's a very good question, Ben. What we did was actually thought, okay, we've got a hiatus. We didn't know how long COVID's going to last for in South America or throughout the world. So we picked up a project here in Western Australia called at the time we called it the Meriden Kaolin project. It's now called Cloud9 Halloysite Kaolin project. Our exploration manager, Tony Greenaway, and his team built that resource into a 200 million tonne resource in a little over 18 months. So we got a lot of market positiveness around that project at the time. So we didn't sit on our hands. We actually went out, found something here in WA and built a great resource. And it is going to be a very good project for us. So, at the end of the day, you have to reinvent yourself and do something when in any business, you have to sort of sit back and try and do your best.
And that's what you said before about being nimble in mining, is that, that was, I don't think anyone would have predicted how much it devastated entire operations across the world. But realistically, you can't just sit on your hands and wait for it to happen. You have to be proactive. And I can imagine from 2017, the lithium demand and industry was, again, it had a massive sort of rise. And then again, it's now just on this elevated trajectory. What have you seen that's been driving that? And where do you see the opportunity for mines to come online and help this ever-growing demand?
Well, in 2019, lithium got whacked around a bit as well. The prices, lithium hydroxide carbonate, spodumene prices came back quite dramatically. In actual fact, I think Pilbara Minerals market cap then was about 350, 400 million. It's now 12 billion. This goes to show if you stick to your knitting, focus on building a project, what you can actually learn from that. I think there's about 2,700 Australian listed companies on the stock exchange here. 900 are junior explorers. 750 are in Perth. 3 to 5% will actually get into production. So it's a big risk profile, exploration, mining exploration. But, lithium, battery metals, copper, nickel, it's only just starting. We're only on the cusp of that total industry.
Yeah.
So we look at the numbers out there at the moment. I think from memory, 2020, 1% of the world's cars were EVs. 2021 was 3%. Last year was 10%. So in 10 years' time, 50% of the world's population will be driving EVs.
And that's before all the other infrastructure I've been talking about, the trucks and even other forms of transportation that are eventually going to go to all EV and electric. And that's before you start talking about the charging facilities and, thinking as a stretch goal, even petrol stations are going to end up just being charging stations. And the ridiculous amount of resources that's going to be required is, I guess, quite eye-wateringly large. And I think people have got this sort of distant reality between, again, how long it takes a mine to come online and find and extract these resources as opposed to just seeing a car or a phone or a charging station. So that lends itself then towards the projects that are currently underway at Latin. And can you share a bit of insight into how they're progressing now and realistically some of the key milestones that you think are going to be achieved or know that are going to be achieved in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah. Yeah. So in December of last year, we started drilling in February of 2022. Um, we had our maiden JORC resource in December of 13.3 million tonnes of 1.2%. Tony and the team did a fantastic job building that resource very quickly. Let's fast forward through to April of 23. We now have 7 rigs on site. We're drilling 65,000 metres. Our goal is to upgrade that resource. That initial resource of 13.3 million tonnes had an exploration target of 20 million tonnes, 22 million tonnes, sorry, from SGS, our consultants. But now we have with 7 rigs on site drilling 65,000 metres into what we call Colina West as well. And our next resource upgrade will be out in June. So the market is waiting patiently for that resource. We believe it will grow significantly. Can't tell how much at this stage, but we're very excited by it.
And when you were talking about originally the almost surveying, that were you using new data, or were you also combining it with historical data from the area as well?
We use both. So we looked at historical mines department, Brazilian mines department maps, looked for lithium occurrences. There's actually a company called CBL, which is a lithium hydroxide, lithium pegmatite in Minas Gerais, the state of Minas Gerais. State of Minas Gerais means general mining. So it's one of the best jurisdictions, if not the best jurisdiction for mining in Brazil, if not the world. And they've been tremendous for us. So they've got plenty of data there. We looked at the historical data. We then used modern exploration techniques. We did some geophysics. We did a lot of work on the ground, sampling, mapping, etc., what you'd normally do. And that led to a great discovery.
And then working in Brazil as a jurisdiction, how have you seen that whole country sort of adopt or even encourage mining, or what's the general consensus operating in Brazil compared to some of the other areas that you're working in?
Well, Brazil is a mining country. Vale, who produce over 300 million tonnes of iron ore, nearly as much as Western Australia. It's just a great mining jurisdiction. It's 270 million people live in Brazil. Belo Horizonte, where we have our office in Minas Gerais, is 4 million people. It's the Perth of Brazil. It's bigger, probably has twice as many mining consultants as Perth. So that's saying something, right?
Yeah.
So look, Brazil's just been, and last week in Perth, we had the Minas Gerais Mining Agency, Investminas, fly in. We signed an MOU, and they're going to, they've actually put Lat Resources Salinas project as their number one priority in Minas Gerais to develop, which means that we have now a certificate for fast track the project through environmental, through development approval. So we hope to be in position mid 2024 where we have our environmental permitting completed, and hopefully we'll have our development approval sometime the second half of next year and commence construction. So that's really exciting for us.
And then when you're looking at this long-standing pathway, thinking into the future in regards to, I guess, setting up those potentially offtake agreements, or just sort of when you've got the asset and you can potentially get it out of the ground, where's the brain shifting next to the next stages that Latin Resources can look at?
Well, next stage for us is continue to drill the build a resource as quick as we can, as big as we can, which will tie in with our PEA, which SGS out of Lakefield, Canada are doing. Once we have that completed, as I said, by June this year, we'll move into our PEA and then into our DFS, a definitive feasibility study, which will show what type of mine we'll have, what type of CapEx numbers, the mine life, etc. So we hope to have that out in our first quarter of next year. And as I said, environmental approvals, development approvals, start construction towards the end of next year.
And we're looking at lithium, as we said, this huge up and coming, well, not up and coming, currently is a very, very demanded product. You were mentioning some of the other companies that are in Brazil, or exploration companies. Does that give you confidence as well that it's going to continue being the sort of sought after resource in that area? And even then, do the companies in Brazil at all collaborate together? And is there sharing of information, or even on the sites? What's the vibe like between companies in the area?
Yeah, good question. Sigma is the largest lithium company in Brazil. They started drilling in 2018. If you look at next quarter, they'll go into production. They're an amazing company. We're very close with Sigma. I talk to Anna Cabral often, who's the CEO of Sigma. She's been tremendous in helping us. Every consultant that worked on the Sigma project is now working on Lat Resources project. Sigma are Latin in this to help Brazil become one of the largest lithium producers in the world. So take, for example, Sigma's project. They have a resource of, they actually start off a resource of 21 million tonne, moved to 47 million tonne in 2021, and then they moved to 85 million tonne late last year. They started construction of their plant in February of last year. They completed that in February of this year. They've been commissioning it. I'm actually up to the mine opening in May, and they'll start production in May. So 18 months, they've built that plant, and that plant will initially start with 300,000 tonnes, move to 500,000 tonnes, and next year will be producing 700,000 tonnes of lithium spodumene concentrate, the same size as Pilbara Minerals.
Yeah, I heard her speak on a podcast, another lithium podcast, and the rise of Sigma was just, yeah, it's incredible to hear. And I mean, them giving you advice and you being in touch with them, I can imagine is extremely valuable in regards to just, yeah, almost following a similar trajectory potentially, which I can imagine is, rather helpful to have. But then you were saying before, you've also, during that COVID, you swung and have got a potential with projects in Australia as well. When you're comparing the two sorts of jurisdictions, what are you sort of noticing? Because I can imagine from a just organizing it and headache point of view, it's quite difficult to work with two completely differing jurisdictions, even though the resources are potentially, it's just about drilling at the end of the day. But how do you navigate and manage those sorts of differences in a way?
Well, we haven't had a lot of experience in Australia. We have a separate team for our Gale project, our Cloud9 project, so that runs very well. We built a 200 million tonne resource in 18 months. So the WA Mines Department were fantastic. The landowners were great. One of the priorities of Lat Resources is always develop those relationships early in the piece with the landowners or the Indigenous groups. It's very important for us to get that right early. In actual fact, it was the number one priority for us in Peru. Sorry. So when we take that into account, as I said earlier, Ministry is just a fantastic mining community. People in Salinas want that mine to happen. They want jobs. They have supporters 100% all the way through this. And obviously, Ministry's Mines Department or mining agency, this has gone as high as the governor, this project in Ministry. So he wants the project to happen. He wants a battery sector, battery mineral sector happening in Ministry. So it's a very big push for the government, which really helps us to fast track our project.
And then, I mean, this then lends itself to sort of, I want to say, the trend of 2023, which is this looming ESG. And I mean, being in mining, from an outside perspective, you'd almost say ESG isn't incredibly helpful for mining. It goes against a lot of what it is, but it really is something that's here to stay. So how does mine or Latin Resource implement those new structures and, how would you say, guidelines in regards to setting up the mines and operating within those sorts of, how would you say, benefits or constrictions or guidance or rules in ESG?
Well, environmental social governance is important in the world today, obviously. And one of the great things about Brazil, and in particular our particular project, once again, we have duplicated what Sigma have done. Our project power will be provided by hydroelectricity. So 65% of Brazil's countries has basically hydroelectricity. So that will be powering our project. We'll have no tailings dam. We'll have a dry stack tailings on our project, which means that, a lot of risk is taken out for the local community with no tailings dams. We'll be recirculating water. So I think Anna at Sigma calls her project a green tech project, and we're developing those same disciplines within our project, which is hydro, dry stack tailings, recirculating water, and the other side of it's social. We're very focused on ensuring that the local community engaged. We currently have 160 people on our site. We have 40 of our own people, but we also have 60 people employed from local towns. We have just funding now a youth campaign, which is a local youth club that will be funding those guys and training them. So eventually they'll end up working on our project. So taking that youth unemployment, turning into something positive. So social's massive, and governance are given to be a public company. You've got to have your governance in place.
Yeah, and I mean, I just jumped at that point there about how many people you've employed. I mean, considering where the company started, when you started it, did you ever imagine that it would get to this scale, employing so many people across the world and giving them opportunities to upskill and develop? And I mean, looking back, like, how does that really make you feel in that regard?
Yeah, look, it's a great thing. That's what you always strive to do as a junior explorer, is to go into development. We employ 200 people in Brazil now, so it's 160 on site. There's another 40 outside of that, scattered around the world as well. So it's wonderful, but it's wonderful to have the town embrace you. There's been parts of South America, and I won't mention which countries. It's hard, very hard. But Australians are the best explorers on the earth, and we know once we get it right with the communities, we'll generally have a discovery more often than not. So it's a wonderful, great thing, but we haven't finished yet. We've got to get this company through to development, build that mine. We'll have over 1,000 people on site once we have that project built. And ministerialised government understand that's why they want to help us develop this project, so we can basically employ their local people.
I mean, it's huge. I mean, yeah, going from what it would have started with, a handful of employees to now 200 to now potentially upwards of 1,000. I mean, that's just an incredible feat. So a credit to yourself and the team there. And then, I mean, you're talking that, what team have you managed to build and how has it been so successful in getting Latin Resources to where it is and getting these next stages underway?
Well, as I often say, business is it's a cliche all about people, but generally in any business, whether it's mining, whether it's telco, whether it's investor relations, you've got to have the product. It's a given. You've got to have the product. So in other words, you've got to have a good lithium project. But what's difficult is finding good people in today's world. And I've learned after over 30 years of business that it's all about having the right people on the bus to take you on the journey through to the destination. Because if you don't, you can have the best product in the world, but if you don't have the people to help drive to get into production, for example, with our business, you're never going to get there. So the quality of people we have in the organisation now is outstanding. It's just outstanding. And you can see by the results we get, jaw quickly, development of relationships. Mauro, our country manager, has done an incredible job with developing those relations. He's a Brazilian engineer that lives here in Perth. He's done a wonderful job getting those relationships developed for us. We have, as I said, 160 people in Salinas on the project. They're just a wonderful group of people that want the project to happen.
And it's just a culmination of hard work, good people, and yeah, if it does get up and running, and I hope it will, and it sounds like it will, then the opportunity for the people to work and build themselves a proper life is incredible. And I mean, looking at the outlook for lithium, taking a step back from Latin Resources, how much do you think that the industry is going to grow? And then looking to the side of it, do you reckon that there's going to be more interest from other companies wanting to potentially get involved with you guys, or, I'd throw the word out there now, the big word of acquisitions and mergers that's looming more and more, not just from mining companies looking to absorb smaller tier explorations, but, even car manufacturers wanting to get a foot in mines. I mean, it's sort of throwing it out into the ether to see what your thoughts are, because there's a lot to talk about, but what are your thoughts going forward in that?
Well, I think it's general knowledge that the industry, the battery manufacturers, the car manufacturers, the big lithium companies are concerned that they don't have enough raw materials to build this new wave of electrical revolution. Like, and they don't at the moment. As you said earlier, mines take a long time to get in development. Brines projects in Argentina and Chile take 10 years to get into development, to get to full nameplate. So, what's been outstanding here in Western Australia is that this state, or this country, which is really this state, produced 11% of the world's lithium in 2016. Today, they produce 45%. We are the biggest lithium producer in the world within a little over 5 years. It's fantastic. But Australia, it knows mining pretty well, and that's developed. When you've got countries like Africa with the lithium projects, that'll be interesting. We believe that Latin's project will be developed over the next 2 or 3 years. I think that at the end of the day, we know there's going to be at least a 2 million tonne deficit of lithium by 2030, probably more like 3 million tonnes now. The mines that are out there saying that they're going to get in production are going to work hard to do that, and it's going to be tough. I think it was proven last Monday when Albemarle made that bid for Liontown that there's a big fear that these big lithium companies that actually produce and sell to the car manufacturers and battery manufacturers are very concerned that they don't have enough material to feed that massive animal that beast that's about to be produced.
Yeah. I mean, that was the point that I saw last week, and it from a stock point of view, it was amazing for Liontown, and they knocked it back, which means that, clearly that they see the resource and the company they've got as being so much more valuable than where it is. But I mean, that's just a glowing tick of confidence for the entire sector, and the urgency, as we know, it's almost been this snap decision that lithium is here and now, and it's always been around, but all of a sudden, flavor of the month or the last couple years is we need lithium right now. And the reality, as we talked about, is mines don't just come online quickly. There's so many considerations in regards to getting the team, the mapping, the approvals. I mean, you've got a great tailwind. It's an incredible opportunity. So, I mean, Latin has positioned itself quite well. Do you see that there's potentially going to be any barriers that emerge in the lithium sector, or you've got to be thinking that there could be anything that pops up? But I mean, how would you approach that?
Oh, look, I think the current market conditions, the high interest rates, potential recession, may have an effect. In saying that, everyone wants this net zero emissions by 2050, and there's some serious fines going to be handed out over the next few years in Europe if they don't. Some of those car manufacturers don't meet those those emission standards set by Paris a couple of years ago. So, there's that tells me that we're still going to see this take up of EVs. Maybe not as strong as what we thought this year, but let's see how the general economic conditions go. It's very hard to call, but we're just very focused on. We know that there's going to be at some stage a massive shortage of lithium. We've got to feed into that.
Yeah, and even looking to the US with their Inflation Reduction Act for lithium manufacturers, and for any car that's made, there's insane incentives for companies or anyone that's working with America to get benefits. And that's, again, a direction of the times of where we're heading in this lithium bubble. But it's not really a bubble, because there's not enough going around, and there's going to be this real demand that where do you find it from? So Latin's positioned itself quite effectively and quite nicely, you can say, over the past 15 years. And for listeners that want to learn more about Latin Resources and stay connected with the company, where can they go and get more information?
Oh, look, we've got we've got a strong following on Twitter. We've got, LinkedIn. We feed information on the company out very regularly with Market Bull, of course, and a few others. obviously the website. So look, I think that from our perspective, the company's in a really good. One thing we haven't covered is where our raw material would be sold, and we think North America is certainly where the action's going to be. As you said, with the Inflation Reduction Act, Biden's got $350 billion in their bank account. There's 13 gigafactories planned over the next 5 years in there. We're going to need lithium hydroxide plant. Albemarle last week announced that they'll be building a lithium hydroxide plant in South Carolina. That's going to be a 100,000 tonne LCE plant. That's going to need materials. Obviously, they're trying to get into Liontown to see if they can get some of those materials. But we see a big push for us into North America. It's going to be a great market. They don't really have the raw materials to be able to provide into those hydroxide plants there. Canada and Brazil will be, I think, the two countries that will provide those materials.
Yeah, I mean, that's the point we didn't touch on was, this shift away from reliance on China and manufacturing. And the US has now got this real, all of a sudden, push in a way to have everything in their own backyard, which opens up an incredible opportunity to, as Australia as a partner of free trade, to get resources there. So it will be an exciting time. And there's some real goals and clear agendas to get us there. So it's going to be exciting. But hopefully I can bring you back on the show in the next sort of period of time and see how Latin Resources is progressing, maybe after the results in June. And thank you for taking the time to speak with me on the show.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks very much.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow the Market Bull on our socials at Twitter and LinkedIn by searching the Market Bull. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website by visiting www.themarketbull.com.au.